What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bodacious Rant. I hope everybody, everybody says that, hell is really hot, but really, in this generation, it's freezing that burns. And we're talking about, if you haven't guessed already with the thumbnail and my stupid impression, we're talking about the sequel to a very new horror franchise that I want to say kind of has taken the box office by storm, and that is Black Phone 2, starring Ethan Hawke and Mason Thames, or Thames. It's TH, so I think it's Thames. There's another couple actors I know who are in it, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. Anyways, this is a spoiler-free review, so we're not going to get super into it. So for those of you who have seen it and also just love tuning in, love our show, feel free to give us that like to show your support, ring the bell for notifications, and of course subscribe. Again, thank you all so much for that. So yeah, Black Phone came out originally in 2022, I believe, and that was a very interesting movie. I really liked it when I saw it because it was a very different kind of serial killer, where Ethan Hawke in that one was called The Grabber, where he was a child murderer, so kids ran into him, he kidnaps them and eventually kills them. Spoiler alert on the first one. And the sequel is taking place sometime after, in which Mason Thames, I did not realize he was the same actor from that one, but he was also in How to Train Your Dragon this year, and he's going to be in that new romance movie with McKenna Grace. I think I Regret You, something like that. I forgot that. And it also has Alison Williams and Scott Eastwood and stuff. But anyways, so this one takes place years after, where the brother and sister from the main movie are still feeling the repercussions and basically PTSD to a certain extent after their encounter with the grabber. And, as they've gotten older, they're still connected to the supernatural, and they get drawn to this camp where the grabber's presence is still haunting them and still very much alive. So that's basically really all I can say, that without spoiling it and stuff. And again, I haven't seen the first one since it came out, but I remember really liking it, and this was a lot of fun too. Definitely takes a lot of inspiration from those old school 80s movies, like the old school Universal films. Very much Nightmare on Elm Street vibes, but in a good way. I had no real issues with that. The effects were solid, and overall acting is just pretty good all around. It's just nice to see Mason Thames, come back, seeing him kind of grow up from the first movie to this movie and seeing him reprise that character. But aside from the nostalgia and stuff, Bern, what did you think about this one?
Yeah, this was one that I was, I don't know, I guess I'm on the fence about coming into, because while I did enjoy the first movie, back when it came out in 2021, I believe, I thought it was good. There was a lot of hype around that movie, and I thought I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it lived up to a lot of the chatter that surrounded that movie. Although I do think the performances there were great. I think Scott Derrickson's direction, it was pretty solid. It's just the story itself was the direction that it headed in wasn't one that I anticipated, and not one that I really gelled with so much. In terms of leaning into sort of the supernatural aspect of it, what they do in the last half of that movie, essentially. So the fact that they were sort of jumping off of that for this one, where they were definitely leaning more into the supernatural side of things, it was going to be a little bit of an uphill battle, at least for me, because I liked the more tactile, the more real danger of the first half of the first movie, where the real fear is one that a lot of us can relate to when we're kids, being kidnapped by some psychotic child killer. I felt like the realism of that aspect of it was the part that worked for me in the first movie. So this one, leaning more into the supernatural stuff, I was a little bit wary coming in, but overall, I think it by the end of it kind of won me over in the sense that I thought was also a pretty good movie as well. That at least coming into it, not thinking the trailers were all that great. I was one of those things where it's a sequel that I didn't think was actually needed. It had a lot going against it, but I came out of it enjoying it just as much as I would say I enjoyed the first one. I think Ethan Hawke is having a lot of fun in the role here. The movie kind of lets him cut loose a little bit more, in particular with the sequences, the dream sequences, I would say, that we do see in the movie. He's having a lot of fun with that. Oddly enough, I think this movie is definitely more of Madeline McGraw's movie, who plays the sister Gwen in the movie. The first one was definitely much more Mason Thames. This one, I feel like this is a little bit more her movie. She's a little bit more central in this one. I think she does a pretty decent job at it. There were some lines here and there that are a little bit cringy, I would say. When it's hard to write dialogue for kids, but sometimes to make them seem adult or seem edgy, they just make them say a lot of curse words, and it's not usually a thing that I particularly enjoy. Like, it just kind of comes off as you're trying a little bit too hard, but that's not her fault. That's in the script. Overall, I do think she did a good job in the first one, and I thought giving her a little bit more of a lead role in this one, I thought she did a really good job with it. And I think Scott Derrickson, with his direction in this one, it's just as strong as the first one. In particular, with the dream sequences that I mentioned, the way that they film it. I'm not entirely sure if it's 8mm or 16mm, but it is an old film format. And it does a really cool job of distinguishing between the two realities, and I thought it did a really good job of setting the visuals for that, and also the setting itself being in Colorado, I believe, in the middle of a snow camp, leads to a really like chilling, isolating effect. That does a really good job for like the atmosphere of the movie. So overall, in terms of the vibes and in terms of the stylistic things in this movie, I thought it really worked. It's just, I guess, the story for me wasn't as strong as the first one, but that's because of what I mentioned, me like in the more tactile elements, the more real elements of the first movie, aside from the more supernatural stuff.
Yeah, and that's very fair. Sometimes we jive with the story or like the aesthetics of it and stuff like that. So I totally get you on that one. Like I said, I don't remember the first one too much, but yeah, it definitely it kind of, I could see where you're feeling like it kind of tried to be grounded, but then when the supernatural aspect came in, it's like it felt a little topsy turvy. At least that's kind of what I get from your describing it. But this one, I'm kind of glad it leaned more into the supernatural. I think it had a lot more fun with it. Some of the sequences and shots were really well done. And yeah, Madeline McGraw killed it. She definitely, I think her and Mason Thames and Ethan Hawke are a good horror trio together. And this one, like I said, like Ethan Hawke is slowly becoming. I kept seeing articles about how instead of Scream Queens, Ethan Hawke is the quote unquote horror zaddy that everybody wants to see, and I'm kind of for it, man. This one's very much like Nightmare on Elm Street. He's like Robert Englund in this one, except with all the super creepy, pervy stuff that Freddy Krueger brought. So yeah, with all that being said, it's a lot of fun. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a good movie to get in the Halloween and winter spirit. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I definitely would recommend it. Like, if you really like the first one or you want a good horror movie, definitely check this one out. But if you're kind of on the fence, maybe just wait till a $5 Tuesday or streaming. But I had a lot of fun with it, and I think if you're a horror fan, you'll like it as well.
Yeah, I think it's come out at the perfect time, in the middle of October, right in the middle of spooky season. So for people looking for something to scratch that itch, and in particular the sort of Nightmare on Elm Street itch that that franchise hasn't delivered on in many, many years. This one's kind of seems like it's stepping in and filling that role, and I think it does a decent job of it. And this one in particular, where it does lead more into the supernatural elements. You and I were talking how it feels a lot like the third Nightmare on Elm Street movie. In particular, that's all I'm gonna say to not like spoil anything. But yeah, it does a it does a good job of filling in that role, and I think this movie is definitely a little bit more brutal than the first one. So if you're looking for something a little bit more intense, this is good. This just fills that role decently well. It doesn't do anything I think incredibly, but to offer a fun horror movie in the middle of October, it does a good job. So yeah, for me, this one's going to be a 3 out of 5 as well. Definitely one to go check out if you're in the mood to go to the theater and be scared for about 2 hours.
Absolutely. And like I said, this could also kind of work towards Christmas, since it does take place in the winter. So it's almost like a twofer if you really want to, especially for the horror fans out there. But yeah, 3 out of 5 from both me and Bern. Yeah, for those of you who did happen to watch this film or, thinking about it, please let us know what you feel about it in the comments, what you thought of the movie, what you thought of the review. Love to get that stuff going and keep the conversation going. But until next time, everyone, stay bodacious and keep on ranting for us.
Absolutely, everybody. Be good, be safe, and as always, we'll catch y'all on the next one.